Let's take a look at your BMW card drafts. We're going to look at the ones that we've received and give you feedback, and then you'll revise based on that. So starting with Erica's here, we have one, and then the second. And what I'll kind of do is go back and forth. What I'll do is I'll give you guys feedback on both cards, and you will pick one to revise. Sometimes some of the suggestions from one might be useful for the other. So, don't be afraid to sort of mix and match my feedback um, and do with it what you want. So starting with this one, good product shot in general. Decent headline. We got to watch our punctuation. Um, and then we have our model number. With this one, I know we talked about it in class a little bit. This one was kind of tricky because we had this one um, sort of detail shot as your main shot, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm just switching screen modes here. Maybe just to make sure that you're hitting the bleed and all that. So it's good. What I might do with this one is I'm just kind of moving things around. I might take some of these detail shots, maybe get a couple of, since you already have this kind of bigger detail shot, maybe get another shot of a car cut, maybe facing the other way, um, and possibly rearranging a little bit. Oops, as I select the wrong thing there. Maybe make sure that these two boxes are the same size. Um, but again, just kind of play around with the location of these, maybe having them across the bottom, even if they're like in this free space. I don't know, playing around with your, sorry, I was thinking and not talking. Um, if we had, yeah, you kind of have to play around with it, but I was thinking maybe down across the bottom and then you could have the logo kind of up in this corner. It's going to depend on what it looks like. Let's go back to the other screen mode there. It's going to kind of depend on what it looks like, or even if we took, well, you have to make sure that it's within that safe zone, but even if you kind of like overlapped it a little bit there, I feel like I moved something, but, and then have your like active hybrid, give or take there. And what you could do with the logo, and this could go for a couple different people, instead of a square, because they're kind of moving away from that, right? Um, you could do your ellipse tool. And what I'm doing is I'm clicking in the center here and I'm holding Option and Shift so it drags out from the center. And you could kind of just have it match the size of your logo there. And then I'm rearranging. Let's set that backward. So that way you have a white logo and it doesn't look so kind of like awkward. So that way you just have the round logo, or the round background rather, for the logo. But yeah, for this one, I might play around a little bit with your location of your images and then like the type of image for this one, and maybe the location of this. Maybe even swap these and kind of play around with having this in the upper corner-ish, give or take here. And then I was thinking of maybe a graphic, like having like a black line underneath that, maybe, maybe not. But again, kind of like, I don't know, play around with the arrangement of it to get this in the top left. So we're reading left to right, and then that kind of brings the viewer's eye down through, kind of, if that makes sense, right? So for this one, I like the concept, I like the idea. It might just be kind of like rearranging some of the elements just to kind of, you know, go with a visual that sort of flows a little bit and reads a little bit better, if that makes sense. And then your second one, we talked about your sort of letterboxing, like in a movie, how it has the top and bottom frame. I think that looks good. Again, I would say a similar thing with the logo. I might play around with placement and maybe even, without the white background even. You might not need that circle there. You could even maybe make it a little bit bigger. What I might do is potentially kind of have this in the corner-ish, a little bit smaller even. Um, and maybe even separate this if you had this on two lines, um, and have like it's like a movie larger up here and maybe down below have like, but like way better. I might uh, lowercase that as well, just so it's kind of like one sentence. But yeah, I might separate that a little more, give it, that pause, that visual pause, right? And then you could also make the fonts slightly bigger. So if you had it's like a movie, and then down at the bottom, try it, but like way better. And then sort of leading you to the car, and then having like the active hybrid X6 and the BMW over there. Again, this is going to be kind of like playing around with placement a little bit to see what works best um, for this piece. I think for both of your pieces, sorry, my dogs are not behaving. I think for both pieces on this, I think they're both really good concepts. I think it's going to be kind of like playing around with placement of your elements for both of these, and then just kind of deciding which one you want to go with. I feel like they're both fairly strong ideas. All right, let's check out Colin. So he's got his in one document. So these are a bit rougher, um, more graphics here, as you can see. Um, I feel like for both of these, they're quite busy. A lot of colors. I like your use of color. I like your ideas. What I might do actually is kind of dial it down a little bit. It is a bit, without the information in there, it's tough to tell too, but it's a bit sort of visually confusing. I might actually, um, oh, I see what you did. I was trying to see how you built that. What I might do is maybe just have like a black and a red outline and a black background instead of um oh yeah, I see what you did. Instead of sort of building it in pieces like this, actually even that kind of works much better. Let's go to preview mode here. Okay. Um, and then you have your shot there. Um, I mean, even if you wanted to add a little bit of red, I might just put a red stroke instead of that large red box. Use it as an accent color, right? I feel like you have a lot of color going on here. Um, so even if you use that sort of like as an accent color or something like that, if even that's a little bit less um, sort of visually confusing. I might, I like again for this one, I like the concept. I might sort of dial it back a little bit. I like your idea of using colors that match with the brand. Oops. I was trying to see how that was constructed. Um, depending on what you're going to do with this shape, if you had like the model name in there, um, I might distill this shape down to just like a circle behind the BMW. Um, and then again, depending on what you're going to do with the headline, you're not leaving yourself much room for like a headline and the model info, right? So that's you're sort of already creating in both of these, kind of creating something that's going to be already sort of visually busy. So I think maybe simplify. I like these concepts, but simplifying these concepts a little bit. Um, even if we got, kind of like wrecking your piece here. Um, but even if we got, switch back to normal mode so we can see what we're doing. So even if you were to like open up this frame and go, not quite 2/3, but almost 2/3 there. And then that way it gives you, you know, sort of more visual. And then you have room for like the model name down here, you know, give yourself room for a headline, even if you move this down a bit, arrange your frame, give yourself room for a headline kind of, and then you can tuck a logo down in here, give or take. I think, again, I like the concept. I think it's going to be more sort of simplifying your approach for both of these. Again, sort of similar thing. This logo is massive, way too big for the piece. I would, maybe uh, replace that with a car cut. Again, if you were to use this image, kind of do a similar thing if you were to do not quite 2/3, but again, sort of giving yourself room to build. It's for both of these, it's going to be like similar sort of criticisms with this, simplifying your design, refining it a bit. It's much too visually busy. It's tough to sort of you know go with any other feedback without your headline and model information there. But I think for both of these, I think sort of simplifying your design, um, again, even if you were to move some of the elements around to make them a little bit more visually dynamic, so they're not, even though you have a lot of elements like in this one, the bottom one, even though you have a lot of elements here, they're still kind of static, like as you're using like half the page here, half the page here. Um, if you kind of like even just a slight offset there or having it down at the bottom gives it, sort of that a little bit more sort of visual action, if that makes sense. Um, but yeah, lastly, sorry, I was gonna say these are fairly strong. I would say cleaning them up. Lastly, for this, if you want this color to go to the edge, you just need to make sure that you're extending that frame all the way to the bleed. I know in the preview it looks a little funky, but even with the red one as well on the bottom, you want to just make sure that we're extending these colors. Even if we're having the black be a sort of a frame or margin, you want to make sure that they're extending to the bleed, so that way, in theory, when this does print, you don't run the risk of having a white space or a white gap to the edge, if that makes sense for you there. But yeah, I think overall strong concepts. I think we need to just work on kind of cleaning these up a little bit, just to sort of have them a little bit less visually intense, if that helps. All right, we'll go to Aidan's. We have a couple pretty strong ideas. These are tricky photos to use. I think you use them pretty well. I'm gonna go to, well, first I'll show, again, with these, we need to make sure that we're going to the bleed. So for this one, especially, this is where this image is kind of a tricky image to use. You want to, oops, I just switched it instead of holding shift. Wrong button. For this, again, we want to make sure that we're, oops, let me hang some elements here. We want to make sure that that image is hitting the bleed, right? So let's make that. Yeah, this image is kind of tricky to use for this. There's like kind of a sweet spot that you'll sort of hit, give or take. I mean, we could potentially, if you really wanted to use this shot, we could potentially cheat it. There's a way we could kind of fill that gap. But again, we want to make sure that we're, extending definitely beyond the trim there for this. Let me go back a few steps. Yeah, this one's kind of, as you can see, tricky to have text over. And the logo, again, I would say, so the same thing with Erika's, if you wanted to put kind of a circle behind your BMW logo, and you could either go black or white. So like in this case, I'll go black, and we'll arrange, send backward. So that way now we have this, now we have a black background. And you might want to go white, depending, give or take. But yeah, so again, making sure we're hitting that bleed for when we print. I like the headline here. For these, I might simplify for both of them. These, I might simplify your headlines a little bit. I might just simplify this to like move forward to a cleaner you. And then you could have at the bottom with, um, there's the X6 active hybrid is what we're selling here. So you could have, move forward to a cleaner you, and then just have the model name kind of down at the bottom, and have your headline up at the top, right? If you used a little bit more bold font too, I think that would help, to sort of separate it a bit. Sort of a thinner font with a drop shadow, as you can see, kind of gets a little bit tricky to read. Um, but yeah, I think overall a great start with this one. Let's go down to this one. This one's a little bit easier to use. You can see, um, again, we want to make sure that we're extending. If we want the image to go directly to the edge, we want to make sure that we're extending that image to the bleed there. This one's less tricky because you don't have that. Oh, I think your frame, oops, I got to extend your frame. That's what it is. So let's extend your frame, top and bottom here, open it up. So it goes to the bleed. Now we'll extend the image. And then there you go. So now you have the image going directly to the bleed. And this also doesn't sort of image wise, this one works a little bit better, I think. Again, headline, I don't mind it. I think it's a good headline. I think I would simplify it. Um, I would, sorry, I'm thinking and talking at the same time. What I would do is I might just simplify it and just have it, it's not ocean breeze. Either have it on one line, it's progress blowing in, or have it on two lines, even separate it a bit, give or take. Um, this one you could even just make the image a little bit smaller. Oops. I wanted to grab both. Have this image. I always hit the wrong one. As I'm hitting the wrong button, there we go. I'm holding down. If you wanted to sort of tuck that logo in there, and then you could have, the model number either under here or even tucked in here, give or take. Um, but yeah, for yours, I think it's more sort of moving, again, rearranging things a little bit, but sort of distilling your headline a little bit. I think your headlines work really well. They're very catchy. Again, for this one, I might just stop it after the in, because it still makes sense and it sort of simplifies it. Again, sort of this one, same kind of thing. If you were to use, even if you were to use this headline in this image, same thing. I would sort of clean this up and just have, move forward to a cleaner view and end it there. Just have it nice and simple. You know, you could swap headlines if you'd like. I think both headlines work. It's just going to depend on which one you want to use. But yeah, I think overall some sort of minor tweaking and rearranging a bit, and either one of these could be really strong. All right, go to Emma's. So I did have to change your font. I didn't have your font, unfortunately. We could talk about outlining fonts next class. So that way it's not a problem for me and also printers. So one drawback from using your fonts. Um, but yeah, so we had this one, and then we had this one. All right, so we'll go with this one first. Again, I would say a similar thing to this. Um, I would either use a circular frame for this one or do that same kind of thing that I said for a couple of the others, just have um, a transparent background on your logo. Obviously, it's got a transparent background. Put a white circle around it instead of the square. The square gets a little bit awkward, but you could use either your ellipse tool, or even if you used your frame tool, use an ellipse frame and just have the frame go to the edge there, and you could fill it with white instead of having these extra corners here. And then I think again, like for most of these, I think it's just cleaning up everything. Um, if you wanted to have the website, I might just put the website down in the bottom corner, leave out all this information here. That's all information that can be used for the back of the postcard, which we're not worried about. Um, I would definitely make this a lot smaller. Um, you know, power meets precision, and then you could even have this separated a little bit and much smaller. Unleash the road with the new active hybrid X6. I'm trying to think of how to simplify. I would definitely simplify that headline a little bit, or even just power meets precision with the new active hybrid X6, right? Just to kind of simplify these a bit. Um, even if you wanted to have this headline be a little bit larger and then have your sort of second line be smaller and sort of tucked underneath, this just takes up a whole lot of space, right? Um, oops, I thought that was on my selection tool. Yeah, your image works really well, goes right to the bleed. Um, yeah, I don't really have much to say about that, unless you potentially, if made that a little bit smaller, gave yourself a little bit more room. If you wanted to have your image a little bit bigger, oops, I always hit the wrong button. That might work. Give yourself, more product. More product is always good. Um, you can make it a little bit bigger, all that good stuff. But yeah, I think yours primarily for this one is going to be sort of dealing with this large space with the headline. Um, I might have just like the website running small, if anything, across the bottom here, and lose the phone number information. But yeah, I think overall it's a great start. For this one, somewhat similar feedback. This one, the size is way off. I need to make sure that we have the size is correct, like that one. So you can see your size is way off. But again, sort of similar things um, uh, for this layout. I was blanking on my word there. Again, I might lose this information and just have like the basic BMW website down at the bottom here. Definitely make this a little bit smaller. Again, having the circle rather than the square. We want to make sure this looks a little bit squished. We want to make sure that we're keeping those proportions. So if you're sizing by hand and air quotes, you want to make sure that you're holding shift or you're using the scale tool underneath our transform tool. So that way we're not distorting logos at all. And then again, sort of a similar headline for this. This is going to be a bit different once you sort of reformat this, if you choose to use this one. Um, but I would say sort of a similar thing with this. I would have maybe bold performance, seamless efficiency, um, and then have this on a separate line. So if you had kind of similar to this, right, the power means precision. If you had your bold performance, seamless efficiency larger, and then smaller, um, drive the future with the new active hybrid X6. Um, Underneath it at a smaller, like if you had this, for argument's sake, let's say this font was 24, and then you had this at 18, give or take, to, give yourself room to sort of tuck it underneath there. But I think again, similar feedback to this one. The main issue with this one is the sizing, and once you get that sizing correct, then you'll be able to rearrange your elements a little bit more. And again, I think either headline works. Rearranging the headline a little bit for either of them. And again, if you kind of want to swap, I think either headline works for either shot, which is great. So it's just going to kind of depend on which one you want to go with. Let's take a look at, make sure that there's just one there. Okay, so yours is on one page. So as we look at these two, so again, the first thing we'll say is watching that bleed, making sure your image reaches all the way to the bleed. So for this, again, I'm holding Command and Shift so that I don't distort my image, and I'm also resizing the frame end of the image. Again, you'll kind of try to have to find that sweet spot so that this stays within that safe area. I don't know if you have more room. No, no more room with the image, but we can work on that. Want to make sure that might be. Just trying to see if, yeah, that is a little bit squished. So yeah, we might be able to play around with that a little bit. But anyway, make sure that you're reaching those bleeds, all that good stuff. This one is a bit busy in a different way instead of like Collins that had a lot of imagery and graphics. This one is a little bit busy as far as the text goes, right? So we have a lot of text in here. So I would definitely simplify that. Um, I might, you know, have your, I'm missing the font, not a big deal. Um, I might have this, if you wanted to have your sort of headline, it doesn't have to be at the top. Um, have it just one line, um, and then just have, um, trying to think, the active hybrid X6. Again, we want to make sure that we're noting the correct model that we're selling here, right? Um, like this block of information, I would say would be good for like the back. Like we want to keep the front of the postcard pretty clean. I might try arranging so you have your, your more sort of classically BMW, have your headline at the top, and then if you wanted to include your product shots and or logo, you can even make this a little bit smaller. And if you wanted to still include a detail shot, you could have a detail shot there, and then have your model number maybe at the bottom right, or even here towards the bottom. I was debating even if you wanted to tuck that logo in here, and you could make it, oops, I hit the wrong button, make it a bit smaller there, and then you have room for your detail, and then have your tagline there, or your tagline, your model number there. But yeah, I would honestly lose this block of text for the front of the card. Um, and again, kind of like arrange, make sure we're hitting those bleeds. Depending on how you want to rearrange this, you might even be able to lose that or switch out that detail image. Kind of decide if you want to use that or not. But yeah, I think overall not too bad. And I would say again for this one, um, similar feedback with this one. I would lose this block O text. And then definitely you don't want to have anything over the product. I would change this to a headline. Try to get it back to, this is going to be tricky because this background is funky. So you might need like some sort of graphic background, even if it's a simple box or something like that, or even white text. I don't know if white text would work there. But if you were to change your text, let's go back to color. Oops. Make sure we're changing the text color. And that wouldn't be too bad. If you use the bolder font, maybe it might read a little bit better too, a little bit bigger. But yeah, I think that headline works really well too. I think that headline actually, either headline really works for both of these images. And again, for this, I would make sure that you can make this much smaller. This is, relatively large for a postcard, but then this way this reads a little bit better. And then again, if you're going to use these detail shots, I would sort of make them the same size, roughly, at least the same width, and then that way you have like similar shots, or you could even move that up and have your details in this bottom corner maybe, and then that leaves room to have your model number or model name here. I know this is like super quick and kind of janky, but if you had, it might be a little bit tight, or even had your, if you wanted to include those details. Yeah, you'll have to just play around and decide where you might want them if you choose to use them. You could have your model number at the bottom here. And again, we just want to make sure that we are hitting those bleeds. This one's going to be kind of tricky because it's, well, not that tricky actually, I guess. But yeah, just make sure that you're meeting that bleed and just kind of tweak so it's to the right there. But yeah, but you get the general idea. For this, I would simplify your text a lot, even if you kind of wanted to have two different details, one on either side, or decide if you wanted to use them at all. Um, you do have room with this image to play around a little bit more than the other. Um, again, if you kind of did it like that, you might need to move your BMW logo down here where the background's a little bit more solid. But yeah, I think either one of these works pretty well with some relatively minor tweaking. It's really just getting rid of this big block of text there. I think, again, depending on what you want to do, either one of these could work pretty well. Let's check out Ivry here. So we have our first one here, a little bit of a different look. And then there's this one. All right. So for either of these, I think either of these work pretty well. I think this one, and I guess it could depend on what in theory, what we in air quotes would do on the back side of this. Generally, um, having like one detail shot, um, advertisers don't necessarily like, but I think visually this is really interesting and I think it works. And I like the idea of having your model be um, vertical rather than horizontal. I'm just kind of playing around with placement in your black area here that you have. I don't know if you want to center it or not. This you'll kind of have to play around with and see how it works. But yeah, I don't mind that idea. I like this graphic there. This graphic, I'm not sure. I know this spot's kind of tricky. So even if you were to have that, I'm wondering, I'm sure you've tried this already. Um, let's go to our swatches here. Make sure we're coloring our text. Oh, it helps if I actually select it. Oh, that's not terrible. I'm sure you've tried that, but just to see, even if you made that bigger, bolder font potentially, but I get, yeah, that graphic is a little bit tricky to work with. Um, but yeah, even if you were to, well, that's not, doesn't work the same way with images. Um, there we go. I'd say like 32 maybe. That might be too big, but yeah, kind of play around with the placement there. I kind of like it down at the bottom. Even if you used like a relatively bolder font, it doesn't not read well. I think a different font choice or just a bolder treatment for the font might work. I don't mind that graphic. Um, I think just with your, go back a bunch of steps. Um, for some reason, I'm feeling if you had that, I'd like that sort of like much, maybe not that small, but much smaller or less wide or tall, and then have this go a bit wider, you know, and kind of place that in there. I don't know. I would play around with it and see how you like it with or without the graphic. And then we can also preview this and see. Yeah, now that I'm looking at it like that, I kind of like that graphic. Um, yeah, I know with the safe area too, this one's kind of tricky. I might try to see if you can play with that spacing so that it will be actually like center in theory when this prints. It might look a little bit off. Oh, what am I doing? It might look a little bit off with the feel like I'm selecting the wrong thing here. Um, it might look a little bit, obviously you don't want it that far, but again, kind of, you just have to sort of split the difference there. You'll kind of have to go from here, but so that in the finish, it's a little bit more centered. That might not be perfect if in theory it actually prints, but yeah, see, that's a little bit more centered. You might need to move that, give or take a little bit. Um, but yeah, I think some tweaking with this one will definitely help. Um, I think it works overall. I liked a little bit of a different look there. This one is a little bit sort of more classical BMW, which I don't think is a bad thing. Let me go back to normal mode just to make sure. Yeah, you're hitting the bleed, all that good stuff. That looks great. Switch back to preview here. What I might do for this one, I might make this logo just a touch smaller. And honestly, for this one, if you were to use it, I might switch these two, make your headline, and then, you could tuck the model number down here or even in here, where you have what would be your headline. But yeah, I would swap these two for this one, a little bit more simple, um, somewhat sort of more classically BMW. Um, yeah, I would, for this one, honestly, I would swap these two um, elements. Um, Giving them the same treatment, same size, make this whatever size this is, make this whatever size that is, and just kind of literally swap them out. Maybe make that a little bit smaller. Um, Even if you wanted to play around with placement of this. So if you had your, headline logo, yeah, I kind of like it personally off to the right a little bit. It's a little bit different. But yeah, maybe just tweak where the logo sits and where the headline sits a little bit. But yeah, the major thing is I think I would swap these two. So yeah, it's just going to kind of depend on what you want to go with. This one, um, has a lot of visual interest. It's not necessarily that sort of classic BMW-ish. So it's not really a risk, but you sort of run the risk of having a client say that's not really how we present ourselves. You know, we won't go with that one. Again, this one is a little bit more traditional. Personally, I like the look of this one. I like that it's a little bit different. So yeah, whichever one you choose, I think either one could work really well. All right, and we have Joshua's here. Um, we'll check out both of these. Again, working with a tricky image here works really well. You have a sort of similar thing going on here. I would say, again, sort of the same thing with the logo. I would have a round background just so we don't have that sort of awkward square space behind it. For this one, you definitely hit that bleed. That works really well. Similar suggestion from before, I would remove that, and then just have your go green or go home larger, maybe a little bit more bold. And then that also gives you an opportunity to kind of, if you wanted to shorten that a little bit, so you have this sort of a little bit more dynamic overlap there. And then have your model number either underneath here, or you could tuck it in over here. But yeah, depending on how, you might obviously need to make this a little bit bigger. If you wanted to have just your model number, the all new Active Hybrid X6 underneath here. But again, I would sort of like simplify, refine, um, losing the square element here and then dropping this block of text, and then having your headline model number at the bottom, and then kind of play with the sizing of this grayish box, just to, give the graphics a little bit more dynamics, just so it's not, not that it was perfectly flush, but just so it's not, when you have things like this that are flush, it's a little bit more static, kind of creates for, or makes for like I don't know, a less dynamic layout with less movement kind of thing, giving your viewer sort of spots to move their eyes to, etc. Um, I think this one again, sort of similar feedback there. I'd lose this. You could even move this logo here, and have style never felt this good across the top. And then wherever you're going to tuck you could have your model number here or even underneath. Again, this font, like I see, like if you had this treatment, like this bolder font here, I think would work much better. Again, you could have your logo with a round element behind so that you can see it more. Um, I was trying to see if there was a good spot to place that. Otherwise, yeah, that's background's tricky to work with. But yeah, sort of a similar thing if you wanted to do kind of a similar graphic treatment here. Once you get your headline and tagline sort of situated, you could have like a white or black background behind the BMW logo. I think you could definitely make this one work. It's a little bit trickier visually, but I definitely think you could make this one work. So sort of similar feedback for um, both of these ideas. And again, either one could work pretty well with the nice use of your sort of translucent graphic background there. I think it works well. Right, then we need to go to Acrobat for Mary's. This one's a little bit harder to dig into, just given that I don't have I almost said Photoshop, your InDesign files, but I can still give you feedback, obviously. So we have this one. It's hard to see. I don't know where your guides are basically, so it's kind of tricky to see, but we can look at that in class. But for both of these, I think they work really well. I like this idea. Um, I might take this graphic on this side and take it all the way off the edge just to sort of make it a little bit more dynamic. Um, I might make the element and the text a little bit bigger, seeing if you have room to make the car shot a little bit smaller to give yourself that extra room, right? Um, and then yeah, that might free up a little bit of space underneath here. Again, depending on, it's hard to tell because I don't know where your guides are, but um, it might give a little bit of breathing room. This is a little bit tight, even if you made these two lines just a touch smaller, maybe like 4 points each smaller, give or take, just to give it a little bit more breathing room. But yeah, I would definitely make this element a little bit bigger, and then try having this edge come off the edge just to sort of give it a little bit more dynamics. But I think that works pretty well. The last thing on this one, which is a super important thing, we're missing the BMW logo. So pop in the BMW logo somewhere, whether it's up in the left hand corner or the right hand corner. Um, making sure that logo is in there for sure. And then our second one, we have our logo there. Again, it's kind of tricky to tell where things are. I think the headline works really well. What I might do is you have sort of mixed fonts here. I might try this one with that sans serif font like this. So you have your Ignite Your Ride, no matches needed in the sort of Helvetica, I'm assuming that's what that is, font. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. And again, depending where your guides are and all that stuff, maybe making this logo a little bit bigger, maybe even seeing if you could put it on the right-hand side, and then you could kind of move this block up a little bit. I might format this block a little bit just so that we have sort of similar spacing all around it. Like you see how you have the top space and the bottom space, you have a lot of free space and then very little on the sides. So I might kind of split the difference, maybe make these a little shorter and the sides a little bit wider, just to sort of even out the space between all of this. And then that will sort of give you a little bit more room to kind of find that sweet spot to where this one fits. But yeah, again, I think overall, both of these are really good. Some relatively minor tweaks. And I think either one of these could work. All right, then lastly, we have Daniels. I had two. I wasn't quite sure which one to go with. I have one you did call revised. So there's that. And there's that one. Then there's, I'll go to preview mode here. Then there's this one and this one. So while they're somewhat similar, you can see that they are, let's go back and forth there. So you have the slight differences here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the executive decision and I'm going to talk about these. And I'll tell you why in a second. But I think either one of these could work pretty well. I think you have this one. I think you've done a good job with sort of a tricky image that size a little bit oddly. Go to normal mode here. There we go. Yeah, so you can see we're not hitting that bleed. This one, this is a tricky image to work with. We need to find that sweet spot. If you really want to use this image and you want to keep the card there, there's a couple different tricks we could do to sort of, I've done it before professionally where we kind of like fake this background. You could do it in Photoshop if you're comfortable in Photoshop, or in InDesign. There's a couple tricks you could do. But so for like this one, I would, let's go back to preview mode. I don't know why I keep doing that with my view. Preview, there we go. Yeah, so for this one, I might separate this a little bit. If you wanted to put the logo, ooh, sorry, I'm gonna shaking himself off there. If you want to find sort of a sweet spot for that logo, maybe making it smaller. But again, sort of what I've said to other people, what I might do is have separate these lines, beat the heat in the driver's seat, and then have this line be a little bit smaller. So depending on what that is, it's 34. So even if you had that like a 30-point font, maybe even smaller, 24 might be, well, it might not be too bad. But even you had it in like separate boxes, so that way you could kind of, let's cut that. So even if you had those in two separate text boxes there, and then I'll quickly paste that. So now that gives you kind of a little bit of room to kind of play around with, where you would want this. If you want that a little bit inset there, give or take, and then you can kind of move these things down, or, if you wanted to try, doing more of a sort of a classic headline and then having this image be down a little bit, obviously change that to a darker font. And then that kind of gives you room to play around with, sizing that logo a little bit. I keep hitting the wrong button here. Why is that not working? I'm trying to resize both of them. Anyway, you get the general idea. So yeah, I think that gives you a little bit more room to play around with sizing of these, and also kind of gives this a little bit more, a little bit more visual dynamics there. And again, if you wanted to put it in the bottom or keep that down below, you might even be able to play with having the BMW logo here, and then having your text, be down at the bottom, give or take. Again, I think overall, I think your concept and your design works really well. I think this, just some sort of sizing and tweaking details. And again, I like this one a lot. I think for this one, let's do, see, what do we get? Go to normal. Oh yeah, you have plenty of room for that one. This one, I might even say to make the image smaller. I don't usually say that for this assignment. But yeah, you might even do well to make this image slightly smaller. Oops, I hit the wrong thing. You might even do well to have your image go slightly smaller. And then I was going to say move this up, but you don't have a whole lot of room to move that up. But for this, I might, again, kind of do a similar thing where you have just a circle behind that instead of the sort of square. What I might do is that? And it's, yeah, it is. Okay. So there's, again, a couple different options. You can use an elliptical frame and have your elliptical frame, and then place the logo within that, and then have your background be white. Or you could have this frame be transparent and put a shape behind it. Um, but yeah, I would say if you're going to keep this down at the bottom, oops, I might make that a bit smaller, just to sort of um, give this space. I wouldn't really change this at all, to be honest. I kind of like this, like really the way it is. I like this sort of divider that you have. Having these both be the same size in this case, I think works really well, just because you have that divider rather than like this, instead of this being on two lines the same size. It sort of is more blocky. But this one, since you have they're a little bit smaller, but you have that divider, I think works really well. This one, I think, is just going to be, if you want that logo on the bottom right, um, having that be a little bit smaller, or finding a different spot for that logo if you wanted to have that, in the center, and you wanted to have that upper left, upper right, give or take, wherever you want to put it. I think right might make more sense there. Even switching out, where you have these, if you wanted to have it, give or take there, that might be a little bit tight with that car there, but depending on where you want to have that. Again, I think this one is just really going to be more rearranging elements. Um, this one is, I feel like, is a slight tweaks arranging elements where you want to have these. This one, same kind of thing. I know the only major tweaks for this one I would say is maybe resizing this picture, resizing the logo. But I think that your text works really well on this one. I think either one of these that you go with, I think would be really strong.